Good evening or good morning, folks. It's about 9:30 p.m. on the first my time, so about 1:30 in the morning GMT. Apologies for not having the analysis out on Sunday. I had some computer troubles. It doesn't look like we've had a whole lot going on Monday. There was a little bit of movement. Keep in mind that we have significant news week this week. We've got Australian and New Zealand news coming up in the next couple sessions, followed by some significant pound and eurozone, and of course NFP later in the week, pretty much in that order. So definitely keep an eye out on your calendars. We could see some big shifts. All right, let's take a look at pound versus the CAD. You can see that we broke the 4-hour trend line that I had in place last week, and we're kind of stagnating around the 55. As you can see, we didn't move too much the previous week. Open was 20 pips, so pretty much sideways. We could see a more significant pullback here as on the 4-hour, we haven't really made it down into the sell zone yet, although we are getting close. So we could see a pullback down to the 4-hour 200 daily 55 area, which you can see gives us a horizontal support and resistance as well. Look for a pullback to there. It is before the zone. That's going to correspond with our 38.2 fib, but I think that will be a pretty tough area to break. That being said, the crosses may be a little difficult to trade this week if we continue to see US dollar dominance, and also depending on what the news does. Okay, let's take a look at pound versus the Australian dollar. Right now we're pulling back a little bit, and we've got a fib from last week's low to high. We may be able to trade off of the 4-hour 55, which is right in our pocket between the 50% and 61.8% fibs. You could see a spike down to WS1, wouldn't surprise me there. However, we do have the cash rate and RBA statement coming out in about 3 hours. Depending on what happens there and also other news, we could see a more significant pullback coming down to the daily 55 again. So initially, I'll look to trade around that 4-hour 55, perhaps a spike down to WS1, and then a close back above the 4-hour 55 for entry. But if that does not play out, if it's not looking like we're going to get a good signal to long there, I will wait for price to move back to the daily 55. If I do happen to get into an earlier long, I'll look to move to break even before the recent high. You can see we have a super convergence zone forming there. It's also 2, so a really big round number there for this pair. So if I do get into a long there, I'll look to break even, and if I hit break even or the trade loses, I'm going to hold for the rest of the week until we touch the daily 55. If we break to the upside, I'll probably just hold off on this pair and look to trade that at a later time. If we break to the upside after I've already entered a trade that's either hit break even or lost, I'm probably not going to try and re-enter here. Not that you couldn't, it's not something that I'm going to do since we have such a big round number there. All right, let's take a look at pound JPY. As you can see, we've already found support on Monday at the 4-hour 55. We haven't moved up too far from it, so I'd like to see a retest there or a potential move down to WS1. Basically, we're going to test like the 188.30 area, which this is about 188.40-ish, and see if we find support in that area and trade the subsequent move back above the 4-hour 55. I don't think we'll see a real big trade off of that because, again, we're coming into 191, so WR1 will probably be where I look to get out of that trade. All right, let's take a look at pound US dollar. I think this may give us the best trade out of the pound pairs. Again, we fibbed last week high to low for a short. Pound USD is looking decidedly bearish again. However, I don't think we're going to make it back to the 50% fib. If that does happen, we have a nice area to work with here because we have the 4-hour 200, the 4-hour Dynafibs are coming down, and the 4-hour 55, and of course we've got the weekly pivot there would all be in play. But I think we have a pretty good chance of getting stopped at the daily 55 and be able to trade a subsequent short from there. Of course, as we approach 1.5, we're probably going to find some support there, so definitely manage your trade appropriately around that level. Okay, let's take a look at Euro JPY. On Monday, we had a nice reaction to the daily 200. We've come up to right around last week's high and kind of stopped there. So you can see we had a pretty large move last week, 252 pips looks like. So I'm going to look for a bit of a pullback at this point. I'd like to see at least down to 136, basically, if not down to 23.6 fibs, so just a little bit of a break below there, and then look for that area to hold and move back up to trade. Also, potentially, we could see a fall back down to our super convergence zone that's forming, and the daily 200 4-hour 55 combo will fall down into that area. That would actually be my preferred area to then look for a long, but that's going to depend on what happens with price from here. If we keep moving up from where we're at now, we're less likely to make it all the way back down there this week, and we may see pullback just down to 136 and then bounce off. All right, here we have AUD versus the yen, and this is going to be the messiest out of the yen pairs, I believe. Here we have a fib from the daily, so that is going to be, let's see, this, or today's first, so last month's low to high, and it looks like we've been finding some support around the daily 200, and I think that's probably the best place to trade that pair is going to be basically 94.50, where we have a convergence of the two daily EMAs and also pretty close to the 4-hour 200. However, the problem with that is we have this 4-hour 55 and 95 as well, which we're a little bit above now. That's kind of been holding price down. So probably better opportunities elsewhere, but potentially if we do fail to move up and we get another bounce off of the daily 200, we could trade there. Otherwise, to trade long, I definitely like to see a break above 96, and then for that area to give us good signals that it's holding, followed by a subsequent long. AUD USD stayed below and pulled away from the pack of EMAs last week, so of course we'd like to see a pullback this week. Probably to the 61.8 fib. By the time we get there, that'll probably put us a little bit above the 4-hour 55. But of course, mainly we're looking for the combination of the daily 4-hour 200, daily 55, and the Dynafibs to hold for a short off of that area. All right, New Zealand dollar versus the US dollar. Looks like it is continuing its downtrend. And last week we broke below 0.72, which, if you take a look at your daily chart, was a major support area recently. So I'd like to see a pullback to that area, and of course it's likely to see the 4-hour 55 coincide there. So I want to see 0.72 be tested, hold, and then take a short from that area, and we should be able to get a pretty sizable trade off of that, I believe. All right, USD CAD continuing our move upwards after we broke the daily 55 a couple of weeks ago. We should be due for a pullback here shortly on this pair. I'd like to see it come back to the 124 area, which of course is pretty close to our 61.8 fib, 4-hour 55 super convergence zone in there. It'll be just below the weekly pivot. Looks like a good area to look for a bounce for a long, and I believe that The first target area that I'll be looking for is going to be around the 126.50 area. That was near the top of the previous range from several months back. USD JPY has continued its trek up, as we've seen with the strength from the US dollar and other pairs. Here, our 50% fib is going to be in a pretty good area to look for a long. We'll have the 4-hour 55 coming up there, and of course, just below that area is going to be 123. So look to find support basically in this range here, and to take a long signal above 123.38. Euro USD was pretty sideways last week, only moved 34 pips from open to close. So you can see we've got our fib from the daily chart still looking for shorts. I'm pretty doubtful that we'll see a pullback up into that area. Of course, it could happen. We've had the EMAs have been pretty flat. They're just starting to curve down for the most part now. The daily 55 and the 200, of course, 4-hour 55 is of course a bit higher. So we'll look for price to pull back into that area. Of course, that's going to be coincide with 1.1. So should all work out to be a pretty solid resistance area right in here. And I'll look to take a short from that area. Of course, we'll want to be below the EMAs on entry. All right, that's what I'm going to be looking for the week. It may be pretty tough to get entries. You may see some large spikes. So definitely manage your trades around the news.